1600s, the author Anita Williams, who wrote the Cocopah People book, credited the Spaniard Hilarado as coming up the Delta, and he encountered the Cocopahs for the first time. He was the first European to encounter the Cocopahs, and he marveled at them, their physical structure and their living and their subsistence they did. He estimated there was about 3,500 to maybe 5,000 Cocopahs living in this region alone, not to mention more outside of this region. Now, today, my mother, Cora Palmer, who was a Cocopah potter and Cocopah, and she mentored under the renowned Mojave potter, Elmer Gates, from Parker, Arizona. She grew up during the early 1900s, and she estimated there were about 3,500 people in this area again. Many families, a lot of families. Each family, she said, had at least one, if not several, within the family that were capable of making Cocopah pottery. And it was used for decorative, funerals, and for utilitarian purposes. We fast forward today, less than a century later. My mother and I are the only two Cocopah potters alive today. Our tradition of making Cocopah pottery is dying. So my goal here is to create this presentation and hopefully expound on it with other types of presentations and approach the tribe to try to educate and rekindle the tradition of making Cocopah pottery, especially among the youth. I'd like to target adults as well, and I'd like guidance from the elders. But I think it's something that needs to be done. You can see how in a very short period of time, it's almost gone. I think it's also important too to share with other people that are outside of Cocopah what this process is, so they have an understanding. It's hard to understand other people if you don't know about them. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of making Cocopah pottery. I'm going to go through the 4 processes, which there's probably 5, but I combine 2 of them because I think they're similar, and I'll get to that as we go through the presentation. The first part of making Cocopah pottery, obviously, is we have to have clay. Cocopahs didn't run down to Michael's, or didn't run down to Hobby Lobby or Pottery House. We had to go out and find pottery. Pottery exists in stratas within the layers of the earth. And on my right, your left, is a ribbon of strata. You can see where the arrow is pointing along that. And that's actually at Cocopah North up there along the sand cliffs. Now, I don't encourage anybody to rappel down there and get that clay, but I just wanted to show you that it does exist in layers. The other slide, to my left, your right, shows where I gathered the clay for my project here. This is based on my mother's experience. She said to go look along the Colorado River, find a sandy place, and dig down and see if you can find some clay. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, the clay is by water and it's really moist and it's usually active. Number two, it's encapsulated with sand. If you look at the photo there, you'll see that the clay is about a foot down from the sand. It's encapsulated within sand. And sand is part of what we use as Cocopahs to temper the clay as well. So it's not a bad thing. It doesn't have a lot of contaminants in it. It doesn't have any roots, rocks, anything like that. So it's very easy to work with. So I gathered about a 5-gallon bucket there of clay, and I took it home and I let it dry. Once it was dry, I took off the sand with the light brush, and then I took it and I needed to prepare it, what I call the dry mix. And what I like to do with it is I like to take the dollar store. Thank God for the dollar store. I like to take the dollar store grater and grate the clay. Granted, there's going to be larger pieces that fall off into your bucket, but I then take a strainer and strain it again. So I have a fine powder of clay. I then add temper to it, which is, in this case, sand. My mother recommended sand because I'm not an experienced potter, and sand, she said, is what the young kids use when they learn how to make pottery. Now, older adults, more experienced potters, they use a more coarse type of sand, and they actually have to grind it into a powder. But I use sand, and I use it in various ratios, 25, 75, 50 to 50, and to determine what is the best amount of temper to put into the clay mixture. And I found with my stuff, it worked 25, 75, 75% clay, 25% temper. The next step is to take this clay and prepare it. And you add a little water to it, so it gets a consistency that makes it easy to work with, so it's easy to work with, just like the clay you would get at Hobby Lobby. And you can take it, and once you've got it in that form, you've got to knead it, just like you would knead a piece of yeast bread or something. About 45 minutes to knead this ball of clay. And then you take off the amount that you need, and you begin making the pot. Now, I'm talking about the contemporary way of making pots. So, what I do is I take a glass vessel or bowl that's about the size of the pot I want to make. I turn it upside down, and I place a piece of cloth on it, and then I take an adequate amount of clay and I ball it into a ball, and then I make it into kind of like a pancake, as big as I can, and then I push it onto the bottom of that. That forms the base of my pottery. And because I've got the cloth on there, the clay doesn't stick to the bowl. I then release it and put it back up. And then I use a coiling method. And I'm not going to get into coiling methods. I have a reference sheet here that I'll give you before you go. That there's many internet sites that will tell you about how to make coil pots. But basically, you're rolling coils, placing them around, and you continue to build up the sides. And you have to wait maybe 10 or 15 minutes so that the base hardens a little so it doesn't all collapse on you. And you also got to be sure not to use water. A lot of people like to use water because they like to screw it up. Use too much water, the thing collapses on you. It's a process that you have to go through and learn. It's an experience, and as you go through it, you begin to understand more and more what the do's and don'ts. Once you have the vessel built to the appropriate size that you want, the next step you have to do is you've got to let it dry. Now here in Arizona, that's a tough thing. Making pots in the summertime, it can dry too quick. In the wintertime, it can take too long. So again, it's one of those experimental things where you have to understand where you're going to put your pots inside your garage, and where you're going to put them. Cover them with plastic to keep moisture in, and let them gradually cure. It takes anywhere, depending upon the temperature and so forth, anywhere from 2 to 3 days to 2 to 3 weeks for a pot to completely dry. Once you have a pot, now you need to put designs on it. Okay? And by the designs, I mean we've got to take a look at what are the patterns we're going to put on it. Okay? Now you can see from the slide here, I'm applying a yellow paint. This is a natural mineral. It's called yellow ochre. And it's in a lot of places, just like clay is. Now, potters like me and my mother, we won't tell you where we gather our sources, but we will share it with you. Now you see it goes on as a yellow paint, and I mix the ochre about 25-75 with water. Okay, 75% water, 25% ochre, and it produces a paint which goes on yellow like that. Then you paint your design. You can see I painted the top of that. That's a real small pot. And I painted some symbols on the side of the other one there. And again, it takes about 2 to 3 days for that to dry, and you want to give it 2 coats. So about a week or so to put 2 coats on it. The more coats you put, the more vibrant the color, and we'll see that here. The next thing to do in the process is, once this is dry and everything, we need to fire the pot. And I'm using a very interesting firing mechanism here that I had a friend make for me out of a 50-gallon drum, and he welded it all together, and this lid comes off, and inside of there is almost like a little barbecue area, and I put the pots in there, I put wood around it, and we fire it. And we let that thing burn all night, maybe throwing some more wood on it throughout the night, until the next morning when the fire is completely extinguished. And gotta be careful, because it does get hot. So you want to let it thoroughly extinguish, thoroughly cool, maybe 24 hours, 18 hours as it burns down. This fires it, and the temper in it, and the paints on it creates what's called a reductive process. The temper hardens the clay. The fire has a reductive process in the ochre and changes the color of it. And what you end up with is pottery like this. You see how the ochre has changed from yellow to red. Produces this is what they call, anthropologists, archaeologists, they refer to this as red on bluff. The red on the bluff of the clay. So you can produce very nice pottery with vibrant colors. There's other different paints out there that produce whites, blacks, yellows, different minerals that you get that make these pots. So you can see it's a very laborious. At this point here, I've probably spent about 7 to 8 weeks, about a total of probably, anywhere from 60 to 80 hours of gathering all the necessary elements, putting it together, putting the process in it, making the pot, letting it dry, painting it, filing it, finally come out with a product. Now, I'm not a very good potter, but with practice, patience, experience, you can produce pots like this. This is what my mother produces. This is what's called an effigy. It is used in funeral ceremonies. This is just a Cocopah rendition of a house. And then we've got another effigy over here, which she actually put beads through the ears, and some symbols of the deer and so forth. And then the one up there is a contemporary piece. And it's not something that was made traditionally. It's a contemporary piece called the Singing Lady. And if it's made correctly and so forth, you can put this pot down, and the wind will come across its mouth, and it will make a singing noise, almost like a chime. So these are the things that can be done through diligence and hard work. And this is kind of just a snapshot of the Cocopah process. As I said, my mother was tutored by Mr. Elmer Gates, a renowned Mojave potter, and he spent years on his pots, and this is what he can create as a contemporary piece. You can imagine painting that by freehand and getting everything to come out symmetrically. So, to sum everything up, my goal here was to present to you an overview of the process of how Cocopah potteries are made, the traditional way of making ceramics by Cocopah, with the goal of eventually putting together a much better presentation that I can take down to the tribe, and if the tribe allows me to educate and show some of our youth and adults how to continue our tradition. If that's not possible, then I'll write a book. But I can't stand here and let part of my tradition die. I'm not going to do that. So one way or the other, I'm going to make sure it continues. I thank you.